Joining us now to analyze today's headlines is Chenjerai Kumanyika, Assistant Professor of Communication Studies at Clemson University. Hi, Chenjerai. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration released data today that confirmed global temperatures between December 2014 to February 2015 were the highest on record. Despite record cold weather on the U.S. East Coast, which Republicans like Senator Jim Inhofe have used to deny climate change, the data are an indication that global warming is underway. President Obama is set to sign an executive order this morning to cut the federal government's greenhouse gas emissions. There are hundreds of millions of acres of public land owned by the government on which there are coal, oil, and gas operations. And just 2 days ago, Interior Secretary Sally Jewell pledged to strongly address these operations. President Obama has said he wants the last 2 years of his tenure to be marked by bold action on climate change. Chenjerai, do you think he's committed enough to drastically cut emissions?
Well, I think the Obama administration is moving in the right direction on this, but not nearly fast enough. The NOAA report on this year's record temperatures make that crystal clear. First, Obama's only moving forward as a result of ongoing climate change efforts by grassroots organizations. And, Earth Justice, for example, sued the administration in an effort to force them to regulate gas and oil companies. And it's important to listen to organizations like this because there's a strong consensus that it's time to move past fossil fuels altogether. The other thing is that many of the other administration's other programs have tended to rely on giving companies incentives to regulate themselves, and that's proven not to work. So, we have to support organizations like the Sierra Club, 350.org, Idle No More, who really have brought us to this point.
Students at the University of Virginia are up in arms. More than 1,000 of them marched last night to protest the treatment of fellow student Martise Johnson by an agent of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Department. Johnson was arrested by 2 officers so violently that he required 10 stitches to his head. The 20-year-old black student is an Italian and media studies major and was arrested unexpectedly while outside a club. Photos of his bleeding face and head have been widely shared online. Meanwhile, the National Urban League released its 2015 State of Black America report this morning. Mark Morial, the group's president and CEO, told press, quote, "Black America is in crisis, a jobs crisis, an education crisis, and a justice crisis." Chenjerai, are we making slow progress on police brutality against African Americans? It seems as though more people are protesting, and now it's making the news more often than it used to.
I think we are making progress, but it also shows how persistent these problems are. I mean, police brutality has been a nationally recognized problem for a while, dominating news headlines since at least August of 2014. And you still have these types of incidents occurring on a daily basis. There's no real crime here, and yet another unarmed young black citizen is treated with violence. So these problems are also widespread. This was an alcohol beverage agent, and so we can see that the violent logic of law enforcement is also present here. And of course, it's racialized. Sonali, I can't help but notice this incident happened only days after St. Patrick's Day, a day when white students on campuses throughout the country display all kinds of public drunkenness. So at least there's an infrastructure that can amplify the issue, and Martise Johnson's name will be part of this movement.
And finally, the American Civil Liberties Union has filed another lawsuit against government secrecy, this time over the policies of the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, at airports. The TSA has a program to detect unusual behavior called Screening Passengers by Observation Techniques, or SPOT, which it says has scientific justification. When the ACLU filed a Freedom of Information Act request for supporting documents last year, there was no response. The newly launched lawsuit claims, quote, "There is no known instance in which these techniques were responsible for apprehending someone who posed a security threat." Instead, the ACLU worries that the TSA program is based on pseudoscience and results in racial profiling. A former TSA head told Congress during 2012, behavior detection officers referred 2,116 travelers to law enforcement officers, which led to 183 arrests and 30 travelers denied boarding. However, not a single would-be terrorist has been spotted over 12 years. Chenjerai, what do you make of the SPOT program? Can you hear me, Chenjerai?
Well, in September of 2014, yes, I can. Okay. In September of 2014, The ACLU released a report of TSA screening from May 2012 to February. And what they found was an airline security caste system where government employees and politicians enjoyed expedited screening at airports while the general public is subject to scrutiny even when passengers are not on the so-called no-fly list. So the overreach of this kind of surveillance affects groups differently. Some people are subjected to a particular kind of treatment. And then on the other side, there's no data suggesting that these practices are effective in reducing terrorist acts. And the TSA also lacks a system to evaluate its own mistakes. So I see the ACLU strategy as one effort to push back against this egregious type of surveillance and really non-security measures.
And we'll see what comes of this lawsuit. I certainly would like to see the so-called scientific justification for this program. Chenjerai, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you.
Chenjerai Kumanyika is an assistant professor of communication studies at Clemson University, and he's our daily Newsflash guest expert on Thursdays. This is Uprising. We'll be right back.